This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Believe it or not, the future of Roswell, New Mexico is not aliens. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Actually, that is one of the planks in a platform being put forward by a new candidate for the mayor of Roswell, New Mexico. He's a gentleman that we are honored to call our friend. We first talked with him in the spring of 2005 after hearing about his Ancient of Days Bible UFO conferences. I've got some of those DVDs sitting underneath the television screen you see behind me here. He's beginning a new adventure in Roswell. He's got some ideas for the city, and he'll explain why aliens is not one of those ideas he sees to move the city forward. We welcome to the program, for the first time in far too long, our good friend Guy Malone. Guy, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me back again, Derek. It's always wonderful to get to talk with you and Sharon.
Well,
whenever we were discussing.
Yeah, we had a wonderful time back in 2017 where we were sent by Tom Horn along with Josh Peck to the 70th anniversary of the famous Roswell crash. We discovered, Josh and I, in our research for our 2017 book, The Day the Earth Stands Still, that Roswell has not always been known for aliens. In fact, it was not really even known after the initial flap in 1947. Things kind of died down. It wasn't until the 80s again that things came back as the city tried to find a way to recover from the closure of the big Air Force base there. So, but it's
Air Force Base, Candy Factory, the Levi's Factory, Bus Factory. A lot of stuff got moved out because it is often said, after I moved here in the 90s, what I heard from people is that the northern part of the state, where the capital is, wasn't really fond of the way Roswell voted conservatively a lot. And they took away the air base, for starters, as you're aware of. And then a few other things started going as if it was some intent of punishing us for a certain presidential election or the way we voted. And that rift still exists. I can't help but it'll be part of what we talk about later on as we progress in this. It's one of the things that it's still huge in the air that I'm feeling needs to be addressed, honestly. Ooh.
Well, we've talked a number of times over the years, again, beginning in 2005, back with PID Radio, and then when A View from the Bunker launched in 2009, we've discussed your reasons for going to Roswell, so we won't really revisit that, but this is certainly a change in direction as you've got a major announcement to make and some views to express here to kind of launch a new chapter in your life.
Yeah, thanks, brother. When we discussed when I was on you in October with the Skywatch Defender conference you did, I conversationally promised you then to give you, just as a journalist, something of a little bit of a scoop because it dovetailed into the topic I had with you then, and just because you and Sharon have so often featured my work over the years. It feels good to actually have friends in the press, by the way. I appreciate you, man. But I'm real proud to share here with you, and both with you and my fellow Roswellians, to your audience, that just this week I formally filed my paperwork and am now officially running for the public service office of the mayor of Roswell, New Mexico. Yes. Thanks for letting me come on and share some of my main talking points with what you'll find out I think makes my platform very unique. And also your viewers who don't live in Roswell, but they do know of my work here, thank you again. I absolutely solicit your prayer covering for what could become a somewhat grueling next couple of months for me.
Well, I have no doubt about that.
Sort of rebutting the alien topic.
Yeah, I have no doubt about that. When you're challenging the main thrust of the Chamber of Commerce, you may find some pretty strong headwinds. So definitely prayers coming your way.
Yeah, a very few people make a lot of money off the UFO topic in Roswell. Not everybody benefits, especially not directly. But we all know trickle-down theory is not what they claimed it was years ago. We don't all benefit as well as much as they would have us to believe. For those of you who are in Roswell, by the way, worth saying, if you're pretty sure you know my face, but can't quite put your finger on my name or who I am exactly, it's because I worked at the Cattle Baron restaurant here for about 16 years. So, yeah, light bulb there. Almost everybody in Roswell, honestly, knows me sort of from there. you'd know me either from Cattle Baron or from Christchurch, is what I've gotten used to saying over the years when I'm meeting someone new or we know each other's faces. But I've probably served half the population in Roswell in that capacity already. I hope I made a good impression on you and that you have a good memory of me. So now I'm looking to continue serving you just in a new way. My reasons for running are way different from most politicians you'll see. They're very unique to Roswell and what I believe I can do for us here, in fact. And they're not all typical political issues that you're likely to hear out of the other candidates' mouths, actually. So the chance to do some explanation here on video, even with PowerPoints, as Derek, that's totally my crutch. It's great to do it this way, to just talk from my heart in the presence of my friend, instead of, say, a town hall meeting or a press conference. Because there's a little couple nuances to cover. I have 3 main talking points. All could devolve into little subreddits of their own if I'm not careful. But this is what separates me from what looks like the classic red versus blue contest that otherwise is what seems to be brewing in Roswell right now. Which to me, it just feels like more of the same choices we've had as voters for decades now. Even before Obama at the presidential level, I felt for many elections that it doesn't really feel like any of us anymore are actually voting for someone that we like. We're mostly all voting against someone else. Like, well, I'm only voting for this person because, or else this other person will win, and that would just be a disaster. That feels like the only choice we've had lately. And I don't like that. But here, both of our more well-known mayoral candidates, the incumbent, Kintai, and challenger Jennings, they're of course already saying things like tough on crime, help attract businesses, improve the schools, and work on the roads and the potholes. These are all things that we all want and that we'd all vote for if it really is that simple. And that I feel that both they and myself would work towards these things, of course, in the role and given the chance. And these are such run-of-the-mill campaign promises, though, that I want to introduce a few ideas that you're just not going to hear anywhere and give you reasons this time around to actually vote for and not against someone. The first of these is that in Roswell, I think it's time that we really decrease our emphasis and our reliance on the UFO phenomena and that industry as our source of identity and tourism. It's just way over the top. There's definitely people that think it's cool and that it happened just the way the Sci-Fi Channel says so. But there's also quite a few people here that honestly, and I'm sorry if I offend, but there's lots of people here who don't believe in it, or they think that it's all stupid, or that it's creepy or demonic, or that the 47 incident happened, but not the way that Hollywood and the marketers like to portray. And those here who operate only from the mantra that, well, it makes us money, therefore it is good, those people have had their turn, in my view. They've had their say and they've had their way here for quite some time, actually. And there are also those here, though, who think that the love of money is the root of all evil, and who don't think that city promotion or endorsement of alleged aliens is really appropriate from a governing perspective. And that's the faction that I hope I'm speaking to with this angle and asking for your real support in the way of your vote. If you want to see any chance of change on this particular front happening in Roswell, maybe ever, I mean, I'll ask you, has any other mayoral candidate ever said, hey, Roswell, I think it's time we give this alien thing a rest and see if we can't actually do better? Now, this camp that doesn't really care for the alien thing being preeminent in Roswell has been the silenced majority in Roswell. I'm speaking up for them now. Always have, as many already know, but now in a new way. If you know my history and how I came to Roswell in 1999, you'll already know that I don't personally believe the aliens exist, much less that they crashed here in Roswell anyways. Let me switch to the PowerPoint here. You've got it. Derek, I've done talks on these topics several times over the years, in fact, and you know that my views are much more popular outside of Roswell on this topic and among your audiences than they ever have been here. But I do sometimes conduct public lectures to promote my views. And yeah, it raises some discussion for a day or a weekend. I've honestly changed a lot of minds worldwide with my presentations. But then life goes back to normal here, and Roswell goes back to hawking the alien story to sell T-shirts. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not attempting to legislate on this just from my personal views, though, or to prohibit the rights of anyone who has different views. That's un-American, and I won't have it. I just strongly feel that the city of Roswell as a corporate entity needs to get out of the UFO business. One reason is that it's a smack in the face insult to every business owner in the downtown Roswell area that the city of Roswell is their direct competitor for souvenir sales. If you think aliens are cool and that selling T-shirts is how you want to make your living and by promoting them, that's your choice. But you shouldn't have to pay taxes to a city corporate entity that is also selling T-shirts and alien caps and mugs downtown right where you have your shop. By selling UFO merchandise, our city is directly taking dollars out of the hands of the tourists who should be walking into our local small businesses to spend their money. Instead, they're walking into our visitor center for information about Roswell and shops to visit and places to see. But in many cases, they're walking out broke because they bought their hat and their shirts and their UFO coffee mug from the visitors center that's owned by the city. And now they don't need to continue to explore the shops downtown. I mean, talk about shooting yourself in the foot. The visitors center should be pointing people to your businesses, not acting as your competitor. I mean, duh. I mean, it seems obvious. Am I right? I feel the same is true for the UFO Festival. The UFO Festival started off as a grassroots effort from private businesses like the UFO Museum and other interested businesses downtown who are now all but crowded out of the festival by city employees that have no experience, no expertise in the UFO topic whatsoever, or event management, I should say, but is wasting resources and personnel. They're really running a whole separate side business to the affairs of literally running the city. My belief is that a city governmental entity is not formed or designed or called to administrate events or festivals, law and order, parks and rec, waste management. And what the heck's going on with the recycling around here? See, those are the things that a city government entity is called to do, and not to steamroll over local business owners and the grassroots volunteers. I won't read all this in detail, but we'll put up on screen again. For any who want to freeze this, here's some quotes up from former Roswell city councilors who have been arguing this largely unsuccessfully, I think, for many years. Here's from an older Talk Roswell forum and a letter to the editor. Some council members, Bob McWilliams and Dusty Huckabee, strange bedfellows for me, I guess. This is from 2010, I'm almost certain. They're publicly stating that, quote, the UFO festival needs to be returned to the UFO Museum, and that, quote, putting the festival back into the hands of local merchants and vendors will only be in our best interest in the long run. I offer these here just as very short, non-exhaustive evidences that not all Roswellians and even not all city councilors even want the city to be involved in the running of the UFO festival. And that's the side I'm on. So, don't know how else to say it, but so vote for me if that's an outcome you'd like to see your city's leadership working towards. The city needs to get out of the UFO business. If I'm in office long enough, I'll get the alien off of the city's official logo if I have my way, in fact. There's much better stuff that we can and should be promoting, I believe, because Roswell has quietly become an oasis in the middle of this desert for an amazing arts community, for instance. I think it would be really worth touting, like shouting from the tourism rooftops, really, that Roswell is home to several really good performing arts centers now. Like, for instance, we have a world-class symphony orchestra that performs multiple times per year. The conductor flies in from California, and he also conducts performances with the London Philharmonic and other European big names orchestras. He's really big time, and he's deserving of more promotion than we've ever given him, honestly. And also, I'm personally so happy that way off Broadway musical theater is starting up again this year. Come see Annie, Derek. We're doing Annie in Roswell, okay? I'm personally involved with the Roswell Community Little Theater. I wish you could have seen some performances I was in while the world was shut down there, Eric. Derek, we kept performing during 2020 and 2021. Honestly, our little theater had performances during the lockdowns, but well, anyway, I'll say resistance to tyranny. That's a little further down on my notes, actually. But another local treasure. I wish that the Anderson Museum and Art Gallery was on Main Street where people could find it. That's my favorite place in town to send tourists to, because I know it will leave them with a great impression of Roswell. And by the way, we do have a real space museum and planetarium, by the way, adjoining the Roswell Museum and Art Center, also on Main Street, while you're here in town, and a Main Street Arts Gallery right downtown where people can buy real handmade art from local artists and show it off to their friends when they get back home. My point in all this is that there's more stuff worthy of promoting in Roswell than plastic alien stuff made in China for people to take home and then remember us by and share what happened in Roswell when people were on vacation. I'd rather you show a brochure or a fun story from a theater event or something like that you saw, because many of these events and locations, they're perennial, meaning that they have 3, 4, 5 productions per year. And while the UFO Museum and the festival does garner lots of attention worldwide, I'm not saying it doesn't, but if we're being honest, it's also mostly a one-and-done event for most people. It's a once-in-a-lifetime trip that I'll argue most come once and 99% never again, because both the UFO Museum and the festival are mostly a been-there, done-that experience. Yeah, they do have that tiny percentage core of people that come to their events many times. I'm one of them, but especially vendors and speakers, but it's pretty rare otherwise. Reviews are always pretty mixed. I think all of us know. And while we do get worldwide coverage, I think we all know that the media nearly always summarizes us by accusing the city of Roswell of riding that gravy train, taking advantage of gullible tourists. Being honest, most of us are not bursting with pride over that reputation being our designation that is always said about us. But there's lots more talent here in Roswell than we're properly capitalizing on, is most of what I'm trying to say with this portion. If these venues were promoted well, we'd have tourists within driving distance that if they get hooked on our theater, our symphony, or our off-Broadway, they would likely return to Roswell several times per year. And they'd still need the hotel, the food, the gas, but they'd come maybe several times a year, and they'd keep coming back for years and years as well afterwards. That's very different from the one and done event that we put a lot of time and money and our reputation into advertising, a weekend festival. So just thinking about last year's city-run UFO festival, we spent $40,000 on an events management firm from Dallas. I'm not even going to talk about how that turned out or how people feel about it locally. But we spent all that to get people to come here one time to our festival downtown. What I'd like to see happening in Roswell is that instead of giving out $40,000 to promote a one weekend event, that we'd instead take or use any available. We give $5,000 each to the symphony, to Wayway, to the Little Theater, to the RMAC and the Anderson museums to promote themselves. Same rules as lodger's tax. The money has to be spent outside of town, marketing to tourists who most likely will need a hotel if they come for the event. That's where the tourism advertising funds come from. But in my scenario now, instead of putting all of our eggs into one niche, sci-fi aliens, we're advertising to a wider variety of interests, like the performing theater arts or art museums culture, to people with more expensive tastes who can afford to visit several times for several years, just finding out once that Roswell is an oasis for such events and such talent. I'll bet if we tried, there's a greater ROI investing in drive distance tourism 365 days per year for several different events occurring here several months apart than we get from advertising one big event on a holiday weekend that many people can't always even travel on, to be honest. Any business owner would likely tell you that generating repeat and recurring business is their goal to ensure long-term success. Spending tons advertising to mainly new one-time buyers or clients it's just not the smartest play in the book, to many people's opinion. I'm, of course, aware that we get UFO museum tourism year-round as well. I'm not slighting the economic impact at all, but I'm saying that we would still get most of those tourists without spending city dollars bringing them here. The UFO museum has a marketing budget, is what I'm saying, all of their own. The city could advertise year-round performing arts in our community, for example, and bring, I think, more tourists than the UFO topic alone can, is my belief, and it's what I'm running on. So call me optimistic, but I think a lot more local people will want to get behind promoting Roswell as a performing arts center, as a cultural hub, than care for our alien-themed advertising as the identity of who Roswell is and what it means to live here. Let me put this up real quick. I'll quote from a website that I'm not even sure most locals here even know exists. I only found it recently. But dang, ChavezCounty.net, right there, all righty. Their mission is in helping businesses relocate here. If you don't know about this organization and you live here, I mean, you definitely know who's in it. Their 2022 board of directors includes Mr. Jennings and Mr. Kintai, whom I've mentioned here briefly already, and as well as a very qualified group of Roswellians who know the score. They know who's who and what's what as far as the money in Roswell. I mean, I think you can tell that just by looking at them. I mean, I know, Derek, you won't recognize most of these faces, but many people watching that live here in Roswell will know a few. So here's what they say about our economy. One, that it's diverse. They say that we don't rely on a single company or industry for our success. Surprise. They say that our economy is led by healthcare and agriculture, not UFO tourism. I mean, so really, our ranchers and our farmers and doctors and nurses should actually be getting our thanks and the VIP treatment around here, way more so than the alien topic, just based on the list in front of you. Then there's the energy industry. That includes oil and gas. And then way further down on the list, tourism, which of course includes in part the UFO industry. But just for perspective, I include this list to show people that way more money from industries not related to tourism or UFOs is really the backbone of our economy. That's really our identity, is agriculture, oil, dairy, gas, and healthcare and the like. So thank you, healthcare and ag and oil and gas and energy. What that ends with there, talking about solar and wind and cheap electricity on that PowerPoint quote, and that's on ChavezCounty.net, does bring me right to my next talking point, by the way. But just to close out this part, just because I don't personally think aliens crashed here, I don't personally feel that there's a lot of integrity to keeping our city's identity tied to aliens forever, like it's some sort of sacred cow that can't be challenged. And I know that I'm not alone in that view. There was a time here when maybe it did feel like that's all we had. But aside from that not being true, I'm saying that we actually can afford now to take a little risk, and instead of branding and marketing Roswell only as an oddball UFO curiosity, we can spend that money to promote other tourist destinations here with some higher end culture and with some very convincing reasons to keep people coming back. Arts, not aliens, as my website header says. Well, I told you, Derek, I'm not running on a platform that would really be compromised of issues you're used to hearing about in most political campaigns, right?
Yeah, so far. That is true.
As far as politics as usual goes, yeah, there are things here that, as a citizen, I'd personally like to see the salaries of a lot of the city of Roswell job positions cut down to a more regionally appropriate range. We do have some overpaid positions for our area. And honestly, I think there's room to trim the fat or even combine or streamline some positions. Most people in Roswell, with our lower cost of living here, would be quite happy and feel prosperous with a $60,000 or $75,000 per year for their job. But we have some city salaries here above 100,000, over 150,000 even. And I think those dollar figures need to come down. Over a 4-year term, I would look into hiring more locally for some of our city positions and negotiating lower salaries for the positions over time, because we've been in a sad place lately of raising fees for city services lately and charging for things that we used to not, when the answer to me seems to be that cutting expenses is the smarter permanent solution, rather than raising prices, raising taxes, and putting the burden back on the citizen to pay for things that I think we could just cut some expenses and be better off. So the rest of my more unique material here should take way less time than we've already gone through. I appreciate you, Derek, and those watching, again, just for sitting through that and for considering my words only on that. Like I said, it's an only in Roswell topic that would ever come up. The second topic, I'll try to make this quick and painless, but the second half, I think, of convincing Roswell that it's time for Roswell to insert campaign slogan here, stop looking to 1947 to save our economy. I'm instead proposing I'm going to walk us into the 21st century with this. I'm just going to have to rip the Band-Aid off here and tell people listening to get your head unstuck from the media narratives about criminals and scams that are 5 and 10 years old now, and allow me to bring up the word Bitcoin without everybody freaking out. Put simply, Bitcoin is the invention of money for the internet in a way that doesn't require a bank to authorize you when you go to spend, and governments can't seize or freeze your accounts, say if they don't like your political or your religious activities. In the same way that you can get your Facebook or your Twitter account shut off for not towing the party line, that could one day be coming to your money if you're not using a system of money that was designed to prevent that exact outcome. Governments, of course, have tried to stop this form of money at first, and they said bad words about it for many, many years. Like, here you go, Trump, go after Bitcoin. That's a classic one. But really, about the worst thing you can say honestly about Bitcoin is that the price moves up and down sharply, which makes many people uncomfortable as a short-term investment. But on discovering that it really is unhackable and unstoppable, in a true case of if you can't beat them, join them, governments now have settled in on attempting to regulate and also to tax it. Now, it's so innocuous that your grandmother can buy, sell, or spend Bitcoin using her PayPal account. Here's some more just quick images. And every bank in the U.S., by the way, can also now sell and hold Bitcoin for you. Few of them are yet while they're learning the curve, but it's way more legit now than your news media or your broker are currently telling you about. What will probably surprise you to find out is that it's believed that 2 of the largest Bitcoin mining facilities in the world are currently being built nearby here in West Texas, just about 4 hours east from Roswell. And north of us, in New Mexico, the Navajo Nation has turned to Bitcoin mining to alleviate a lot of their poverty concerns, to the tune of literally millions of dollars they've created just this year alone. I quoted earlier that the ChavisCounty.net webpage states that Roswell's sunny, dry climate is especially conducive for harnessing solar and wind power. Businesses here, this is big advertising, enjoy energy rates of 6 cents per kilowatt hour on average. That's very inexpensive. That's relevant because the main way to earn the most amount of money from mining Bitcoin from a corporate perspective is to eliminate all the overhead you can by headquartering yourself in regions that have extremely cheap electricity, as well as access to lots of solar and wind power, like Roswell, right? For time's sake, I'm just going to let you figure this out just from these images I have up, that if literally billions of dollars are being invested into communities very near us to run these facilities, providing jobs, of course, and creating millions of dollars worth of product because there's wind, solar, and extra gas to work with, well, that's an opportunity for Roswell as much as it is for West Texas or for the Navajo Nation, is me being real brief on the topic. Cutting to the chase, another example here. Mayors around the country are realizing what a boon it is for their citizens, both to get easy exposure to Bitcoin ownership personally and for them to attract big businesses to their town. We currently have the recently elected mayors of New York City and Miami, Florida, receiving their paychecks in Bitcoin, as well as having a contest with each other over which is going to become the more Bitcoin-friendly city in the world. Small town mayors, even in Jackson, Tennessee, and Cool Springs, Missouri, are also improving their local economies by educating their residents on Bitcoin and working to attract Bitcoin businesses as well. So, mayors and Bitcoin, it's a really hot topic in the air, and it's all over the news right now. There's opportunity. And I am now personally full-time in the Bitcoin industry myself. The reason you don't see me at Cattle Baron anymore is because I got interested in what was happening with this years back. And aside from setting up a very simple $10 per week purchase plan for myself a few years back, I did a lot of study, and I've earned 3 certifications in Bitcoin and digital currencies. I work now from home as a copy editor for Bitcoin Magazine. Over 1 million followers on Twitter. They do. It's a very legit publication. And I am daily plugged into what's happening in the technology, the laws, the investment side, the daily news that I edit, and so on. And some people here, they think I must have just got rich by selling my Bitcoin and I quit my serving job. But no, I do still work for a living, not as hard, honestly. And I still buy Bitcoin weekly. I haven't sold any, and I don't plan to for a few more years, hopefully. Lots of room to go on that one, my personal opinion. For those interested, there's tons of work available in the Bitcoin industry now. Bam, I mean, this is how you improve your economy, is with better jobs. And it's not all tech stuff either. Everything from customer service, work at home jobs, social media, as well as things that do require a financial or a more technical background. I'd encourage you just to go on LinkedIn or Indeed and set an alert for Bitcoin in the job section, and you'll see dozens of opportunities for those who are willing to educate themselves just a bit. And Bitcoin education is free all over the internet too. And I can help. It's also easy and totally legal for businesses to set themselves up to receive Bitcoin as payment. Like, for example, you can use Bitcoin nowadays to pay your AT&T bill online. Surprise. They just use a payment processing service that takes care of the whole transaction. They keep 0.5% and put 99.5% of the dollars back into the business's bank account. And there's way more tourists walking around our streets that are carrying Bitcoin on their phone than almost anyone in Roswell here would believe is true. But if you have a "We Accept Bitcoin" sign in your window, you might just be pleasantly surprised at what can happen over the next few years just by adopting Bitcoin in your business, whether you ever want to own it or not. So just trying to save some words and some time here. With my certifications, my skills, and now also my industry connections, I go out of my way to connect on Twitter and LinkedIn with almost every executive and newsmaker as I'm editing stories about them. I would love to make it a huge part of my working day, if elected, reaching out to get some of these huge companies to get them looking to Roswell to set up a presence, bringing some of those billions our way, and of course create some jobs. Also, I'd help any business owner that wants to set up to accept Bitcoin to do so, and any individuals that want to know how to safely and legally start buying and saving in Bitcoin to do so as well. Just dovetailing from my previous topic, I'd like to serve the people of Roswell by helping us look more into the 21st century's technology to secure our economic future, as opposed to looking back to something that may or may not have ever happened back in 1947, to hang our hat and our hopes on economically. I believe that promoting our performing arts could really create a new boon as far as tourism goes. But for the people who live here, I can speak on the topic of what adopting Bitcoin can do for your lifestyle because I'm a testimony of it myself. In my 50s, I found a new career, and because of saving in Bitcoin these past few years, I'm also not the least bit concerned about whether Social Security will be there for me or not. I'm kind of set. This is the path I've followed as an individual. I've taught others how to get on board, and the same principles and my experience will work for our Roswell economy as well. So with the permission and the education of our current city council, I'd like to see our city start mining Bitcoin as soon as possible, like the Navajo Nation, like they're doing in Texas. And to me, the first order of business would be to take the initial wave of proceeds and to eliminate, or more correctly, to pay towards the property taxes for any citizens over the age of 65 as a start. You've paid your dues. You shouldn't have to keep paying rising taxes and raising inflation for groceries on something that you believe you paid off years ago. If that is successful, I would eventually want to lower the age to 60 and then to 55. I won't try to make the entire case here at this moment, but the mayor of Miami, for example, is literally having the discussions out loud about making Miami a completely tax-free city to live in. And I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but I do have his number, honestly. We might all discover how Roswell might eventually be able to become a tax-free city as well to live in through Bitcoin. The opportunity exists for those who will lean into it. Right here is just the tail end of a conversation I had with a guy named Bob Burnett. He's the chairman of one of these large mining companies who also wrote an article about different types of Bitcoin mining facilities for Bitcoin Magazine. And just because I was editing his article, I reached out with some nice words, and I also mentioned Roswell's great wind and sun to him, and he politely replied to me that as his business expands, he is, quote, open to New Mexico. Great. Well, with that response, I had to keep the chat going. And he said it's okay for me to share all of this that's on screen, but you can freeze this later. He was quick to say that state and local governments need to understand the opportunity Bitcoin presents and that there is going to be a battle to attract the best talent and capital. A few states, he points out, are already actively recruiting, like Texas, obviously. And he adds those who are slow to adopt will find themselves at a massive, massive disadvantage. For a place like Roswell in New Mexico, they are honestly already behind. And he ended by saying the ability for the state to find prosperity in the coming several decades will be determined by how they play Bitcoin in the next 24 months or so. No action is equal to defeat, he said. And I know that 99% of those listening to me right now don't know much about this yet, but Bitcoin can enormously help individuals, but definitely our city to prosper. It's gone way more mainstream, and I know I shared that with you and your audiences a couple months ago, Derek. I got tons of great response from that talk. Thank you again for the opportunity to present that a couple months ago. But I have no trouble making contacts in this industry now. I'm very well placed in the industry through my work, and if you let me, Roswell, I will go to work for you. I'll go to work on making Roswell the most famous and prosperous Bitcoin city, at least this side of the Mississippi. Silicon Valley in California, they've lost it because of regulation. They're not getting the Bitcoin business. Bob there, he says that we, New Mexico, are already behind a little. So we can't be the first, but I would love to make sure that there's something that we're not dead last in. However, our state sometimes proves to be a bit of a challenge when it comes to progressive business ideas and being an attractive place to move to for those businesses, which honestly brings me right to my third point. I did not make this image. I found it on Facebook one day, and I would love to give credit to the original artist, but I'm of the opinion that southeastern New Mexico in general is not being represented well by lawmakers in Santa Fe. Our interests and our views and our needs and our culture simply are not being represented at the state level anymore. This has been an ongoing pain point for several years here. And I'm proposing that it's time for us to just kiss Santa Fe goodbye. while I haven't done anything with this domain yet, I want you to know that I now own the domain roswelltexas.com. And I am going to be the guy that stands up and says it's time to seriously begin openly discussing the topic of secession from this state. And along with any other counties that want to hit the road with us, let's start talking to Texas about the benefits to them of annexing us. This is not an original idea of mine. It is definitely floating in the air, looking for somewhere to land, I'd say. Like I said, I didn't design this logo, and you may already know that Senator Cliff Pirtle last year floated an amendment to pave the way for counties to secede. He too cites that there's a definite break. He said, quote, an inequity between rural and urban New Mexico. To me, that inequity is pretty simply defined as it's our ranchers, it's our dairymen, it's our oil and gas industry that's generating the bulk of the state's revenue, but they're taking our resources and tax dollars from us, and then they're not representing our wishes. And in America, we do have a sore spot when it comes to taxation without representation. Deep down, we all know there's a more proper and American response to that situation than quiet submission while they redraw the voting lines and plan to take even more dollars and represent us even less. This, too, is in the air in all of America, not just here. There's a long-standing movement in Oregon, I think, of either 5 or 7 counties that have been petitioning to have the state lines redrawn to make them all part of Idaho. And for the same reasons as many here feel, it says their region has long felt alienated from the liberal policies of Oregon's population centers. Now, that sounds very familiar, doesn't it? It sure does if you live here. There's also a West Virginia movement happening right now. We may all know that Californians have been trying to divide into as many as 3 states for years, and I'll admit first thing that such a thing is not easy to do. You can look at this as a perhaps 20-year pipe dream of a process, but just from me talking to people for several months now, there's apparently enough interest to say it's time we get the conversation started. It's not near as crazy as it sounds at first, and I'm surprised how receptive and supportive many have been lately when I mention it conversationally. I laughed out loud, actually, when I saw on Mayor Kentai's Facebook page this week, in fact, someone there replied to him about seceding to become the 51st state, and Mayor Kentai replied, humorously perhaps, but he likes the idea. You know, if I'm elected, I might try to keep him around. I think we could work together on some things if he'd have me. But now, to be honest, we got to know the simple truth is that a mayor does not have the power to make any of this actually happen. But memes and private conversations aside, if it's the will of the people that I'm chosen to represent Roswell, this movement becomes a priority on my agenda. And I start contacting mayors and county commissioners, not just in Chaves County, but in Lee, Roosevelt, Eddy, and Otero. These are all the counties contiguous, bordering both us and also Texas. I start contacting them to find out who's interested, and especially if they've been affected by oil and gas recent laws, I'm pretty sure the interest will be there. But for those not interested, we go to work in all of those counties on getting rid of them and electing people that are interested in it. So this is not a one-term situation, most likely. It's a long-term goal, and there's a whole lot that would have to happen. I feel that we're in a classic abusive relationship scenario right now, though, in Roswell, where enough of us are looking for some RESPECT, and we're letting the powers that be know that we're tired of how they treat us. We're ready to walk. They can either greatly change their behavior, or deal with being in a relationship with someone who's already decided that the relationship is over. Now, I admit I am quite happy and very proud, honestly, of what our current mayor and city council, working with the sheriff and the chief of police, of course, have accomplished. You will know less about this, Derek, but in the way of resisting Santa Fe crowd a bit, especially in regards to masks and keeping our local businesses going, more so than other parts of the state. But we're still hurting. We're hurting from not fighting back enough as well. Mayor Kintai is campaigning now on the idea of keeping Roswell a free city, which I wish it was. They've done great, but maybe not quite enough. I believe more is going to be needed. Right now, Mayor Kintai says that no city employee will be required to wear a mask or be vaccinated, although he has been, he states, and that no citizen would be denied city services over these issues. But the way things keep sliding down an increasingly slippery slope, I think we need to up the ante on this a little more. They're keeping these protections applicable only to city employees, and I applaud that for sure. Great job. But I think as a city, we need to start passing laws that prohibit employers from requiring masks or especially jabs of any of their employees even. Places open to the public should not be able to dictate health decisions to everybody who walks in their door. I don't wear a mask partly because I have severe eczema on my face at times, which wearing a mask for hours greatly exacerbates. It greatly hurts. But I don't feel that I should have a heart-to-heart chat with every Goodwill clerk or manager about my privileged and otherwise legally protected health status either, just to buy some used clothes from you or to walk in your door. I think it's more in tune with the spirit of what it really means to live in Roswell that we more and more want to declare ourselves what's known loosely as a constitutional city. It's a term that people now use instead of a sanctuary city to simply mean that we default to enforcing constitutional rights over any federal, executive, or state orders or mandates. The right to privacy, for instance, is covered by both the 5th and the 14th Amendments, and the Supreme Court has said that includes our medical records. So I'm simply arguing that it goes against someone's God-given and constitutional privacy rights to have to disclose a legitimate health reason or excuse for why they don't want to wear a mask or accept an experimental vaccine to enter a business or to do a job. It's a violation of someone's constitutional rights to have to answer or disclose such information as their vaccination status to anyone, including their employer. I mean, whatever happened to don't ask, don't tell? Let's make that great again, okay? On this same topic, on the day Tim Jennings declared his candidacy for mayor, he stated that he is not for government mandates regarding face masks or vaccinations. Lisa Dunlap at the Roswell Daily Record states that he said this after his speech was over, though. Afterwards, whether it was a casual remark or maybe even an answer to a question that someone else threw at him, that I don't know. But my concern, actually from well before Jennings officially declared his candidacy, is that he would be running for mayor of Roswell, at least partly, some people think majorly, just to be a local extension of MLG, our local governor, or a local enforcer of her mandates, here to whip Roswell and Chaves County into shape and to toe the line by bringing Santa Fe's rules here. Now, I do like a lot of what he said also in that interview and on his current websites. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I especially agree with his recent take on reducing or eliminating fees on city services to city residents. I mentioned that earlier. Like the zoos and the museums, they could adopt a model where Roswell residents either don't pay at all or they pay a different rate than visitors from out of town do. And definitely the local resident fees of the convention center need to be brought back into line. That's a local issue. I don't expect you to explain it, Derek. I won't take a lot of time with it, but it's a hot button right now. But these are mainly just the usual political campaign rhetoric. Right now, we are very close to a single issue crisis determining the soul of Roswell. And I love and I appreciate that so far our representatives have all acted to not enforce MLG's mask mandates here. And I've said that I'm 100% for keeping things this way and even upping the ante. So Mr. Jennings saying that he's not for something honestly does not inspire confidence in me of how he would actually vote or act when it came down to it after the election, especially if instructed by our governor to start changing the way we do things in Roswell. My opinion is that a vote for Jennings is a vote for MLG in Roswell. So personally, I don't think it's enough for a candidate to say, I'm not for this or that, especially only as an afterthought, maybe if asked. I want to lead with saying I'm not only not for, but I am campaigning on a platform of being vehemently, violently opposed to forced mask mandates and 100 times that for forced vaccinations. And it's too late for many now, but I'd like to propose that Roswell becomes known as a sanctuary city for freedom of medical choice. And we go to work on attracting qualified medical workers and police and those from other vocations around the country who have had to quit or have been fired from jobs over this exact same thing. And we market to get them to move here with the promise that we respect your autonomy as a human being made in the image of God to decide what is right for you without coercion from an overreaching, unconstitutional government getting a little drunk on power. One more quote here. We went from the bold-faced lie of 2 weeks to flatten the curve to 2 shots to keep your job. And I'm drawing the line. I'm saying no, not in Roswell. I think we in Roswell are at a crossroads and barely hanging on. There's a fight for the soul and the identity of what it means to be a Roswellian happening right now. And as you can see now, I don't have a normal political platform. In any other year, if this were just a partisan election, I wouldn't stand a chance. I wouldn't be a candidate. I don't have any partisan politics to prop up here. This platform and I are truly for a time and a situation such as this. I'm running and fighting to be a Roswellian, not a Republican, not a Democrat, and not even a New Mexican. Anyway, that's why I'm RoswellGuy.com. And I'm thinking if things stay the way they are, I'm concerned that this slow creep into socialism and communism is inescapable for us. We have currently a mayor that rightly says no to masks or jab required for city employees. But what about the kids and the teachers in the school? Who's fighting for their rights? Who's fighting for the doctors and the nurses and the restaurant and the grocery store employees who worked through the lockdowns and kept us going without a vaccine, but now are facing losing their jobs? We need laws that protect people and that obey the Constitution, not to be obeying more mandates that are not even laws. The people of Roswell are sincerely going to have to choose right now. Do we want to become more like California or more like Texas and Florida? And I don't mean that from a partisan perspective either. I mean that from a personal liberty and an American rights perspective, because this slide into tyranny is the current path that most of the country is on. I would say vote Jennings if you want that to happen faster here in Roswell. Vote Kintai if you want to see it happen a lot slower. But we can't fix the fact that it's happening. We can't fix what's going on at the state level, and I feel that we have to leave them. I am hashtag Roswell proud, not necessarily NM proud, as our current local logo goes. Art's not aliens, Bitcoin City, leaving New Mexico. So I'd hope to say there's no more need or benefit from looking back to the past, Roswell. My goal is to walk us into the future together. And as I said, I bet you never heard those 3 ideas as a politician's main talking points before, have you, bud?
No, that is a fact.
Only in Roswell.
Yeah. But you make some good points, though. I did some looking while you were talking about the benefit from Bitcoin mining. Our electric rates here in the Ozarks are fairly low. We're about 10% below the national average. Our local electric cooperative here in the Ozark Mountains is about 11.9 cents per, or 10.9 cents per kilowatt hour. Nationally, the average is about 13 cents per kilowatt hour, which is more than double the 6 cent per kilowatt hour rate around Roswell. So it would seem to me that an enterprising, some entrepreneur who is kind of redundant, isn't it? An entrepreneur looking to maximize profit while minimizing cost would look at the availability of the cheap electricity in Roswell and see that as a real benefit toward locating a Bitcoin-oriented business there.
Yeah, especially if you set it up to run as much as possible on solar and wind. And then when necessary, you plug in the cheap electricity. In Texas, it's actually competitive. It's privatized to where you get to choose your electricity provider from day to day, I think, but from time to time. And that's very attractive to businesses. I'm saying we could repeat that. We could meet or beat that here. And we have other problems from a state perspective on taxes and that make it a little more difficult for some companies to want to look at. But hey, all the more reason to become part of Texas. Or for some reason, maybe a sovereign state. Some people do think a sovereign 51st state would be the answer. I would look into that. I'd be willing to have the discussion. Being part of Texas is what originally came to my mind, but it's such a crazy topic. And like I said, it could take 10 or 20 years to see anything happen. But as you said, the electricity is really cheap. It's a huge boon for a Bitcoin mining facility to start building businesses here. And there's literally billions of dollars being made right now by these companies. Their stocks are going up faster than the Bitcoin prices are, honestly, on a lot of these companies, like HUD 8 comes to mind. There's like 5 or 6 I have to write about continuously, or I have to edit other people's writings about in the news. And I'm not kidding you, their stocks are exceeding the price of Bitcoin. And these companies aren't even selling the Bitcoin right now. They're making so much money. They're looking for places to go to. It's one of the hugest expanding markets right now, and uniquely, I have the business contacts and I have the lingo to be able to talk to those guys. I hope to get some of that heading to Roswell for sure.
Yeah, and Bitcoin mining is definitely electricity intensive. Just for people outside New Mexico not familiar with the term MLG, refers to Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham of the state of New Mexico. I can also relate to the desire of people to want to decouple from a very liberal or state government or progressive state government. Having lived in Illinois between 2011 and 2015, I was born and raised in Chicago. And you grow up in Chicago, you think that nothing really happens outside of what the media calls Chicagoland, which is Cook, Kendall, Will, Grundy, Lake, McHenry, and the couple counties in northern Indiana that people there call the region. Outside of Chicagoland, nothing happens in Illinois that's important. Well, I have learned that happens not to be the case. Living downstate, south of Champaign, and calling on businesses that were very active in the coal and oil and gas industries, you learn very quickly, and not to mention, of course, all the agriculture in Illinois, you learn that there's a lot that happens. Yes, a lot that happens south of Interstate 80. And just as you point out with southeast New Mexico, it is the industry there, agriculture, oil, coal, that powers the state. But because the city of Chicago and the Chicago metro area has the population, they control the state legislature. So there are a lot of people south of Interstate 80 who would be very, very sympathetic to a secession movement there as well. And you mentioned Idaho and California, and there are other places around the country.
West Virginia.
Right.
Virginia, West Virginia, it's happening. Yeah. The article, I had a little tiny link up on one of the PowerPoints. It's USA Today. The headline was, "Why are all these communities trying to leave their state?" I read that article. I didn't punch it up. The guy went through all that's really required. You have to have the state you're living approve it. You have to have the state that you're entering approve it. And you have to have Washington, D.C. approve it, because they got to redraw all the maps. But the guy said, with as many attempts as different states and places are making that aren't going anywhere, he said it's a long, hard battle. But he ended the article saying that by the year 2050, he believes that the map of the United States will look quite different than it does today. So it's a long process. It's not a promise I can make as a campaign promise,
sure,
other than to start the conversation and to get the movement going. Hand it off to people that are better, to people that are more passionate in time as I get older. But 10, 15, 20 years down the road, at least it gives us the promise of having a government that is representative of our values and our wishes.
Now, as a Bible-believing Christian, let me ask you this one question. How does politics fit into your worldview, which by definition must include a faith in Jesus Christ? How do you how do those you collate those and fit those together?
there's no divide to me. There's no divide in how I run myself as a businessman. There's no divide to me. I mean, when I was a waiter, I was a Christian waiter. Honestly, when I was a bartender, I was a Christian bartender. I operated the bar under Christian principles. The owners trusted me not to steal. I had keys to the most expensive inventory items in the building. I had the power and the authority to say no when an 18-year-old girl was being offered a drink by a 21-year-old guy who was going to tip me 10 or 20 or $50 to make it happen. I didn't operate as a moneymaker or as an industry I was in. I would hope as a politician. They say nobody's clean 100%. I'm so not involved in politics. I'm going to have to surround myself with a few men and women that know more than I do about the situation to even navigate the waters. But I mean, his kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I think when we say the Lord's Prayer, we are crying out for God's representation in the politics. We really want God's will to be done on earth in our city as it is in heaven. And a lot of that has to do with justice. God has a lot to say about when the wicked are in power versus when the righteous reign, or when the righteous rule, people rejoice. So it's not a conflict for me at all to think that I would just hopefully that I would have to hear from God. I don't think I would be running if I hadn't heard something from God, not specific, but just this long leading and so on and so forth. And if nothing else, when you get back to the reasons I'm here in Roswell as a missionary anyway, the topic that I'm most known for, the worst case scenario, I mean, I do have and I think it's a very curious platform that the media, I don't know, worldwide might find it kind of odd that someone in a political position in Roswell doesn't believe in aliens or isn't willing to sell out the integrity of a city for something that we'll just leave it as saying may or may not be true. So even in that sense, in the face of here's all the money that selling UFOs and aliens can bring to you in your city, I think having maybe the integrity, or at least having the inclination to say no to that, means that I'm wanting to honor integrity and God and truth more so than I'm wanting to get rich. So hopefully I'm already living most aspects or areas of my life. It's not a pie chart. It's not like I'm a Christian when I'm at church on Sunday, and then I'm a waiter when I'm here, or I'm a writer, or I'm an editor when here. I mean, God saved me. I have a new spirit. It's born again. So occasionally a cuss word might ooze out of me. If I hit my hand with a hammer, you're going to hear something that, you won't see written in the Bible probably. But given time to pray and to meditate and to think and decide on how to run policies and converse with others, yeah, I would imagine that some Christian principles and some biblical theology, some principles would come out. Again, not in the sense of, this is America, and if you want to sell UFOs, it's your right. It's my job as a politician, in fact, to make your pursuit of happiness, easier, to facilitate that for you. I'm not judging you or telling you what you can or cannot do. In fact, I would be enabling you as a legislator to do what you want to do, not what I want you to do, not what the state wants you to do. Again, Christian principles are very embedded in the Constitution of the United States. We all know that. The Declaration of Independence references God 6 or 7 times. We're signing our lives away with trust in divine providence of our Creator. Same as me. I think God's in this. It's not a conflict at all.
And at the very least, as you mentioned, the curiosity factor of the media saying there's a candidate for mayor in Roswell who doesn't think aliens should be part of the city logo anymore. Yeah. This, if nothing else, is a very definite Mars Hill opportunity to speak to this particular subject to a broader platform.
Well said.
Where do people find more about your campaign?
Well, even the Haman getting hung on his own gallows comes to mind. Something a friend of mine said to me years and years ago. Since you put it that way, I can reply that way. What did you finish with?
Where do people find out more about your campaign?
RoswellGuy.com. I mentioned I'm not New Mexico, #proud. I'm not a Republican or Democrat or anything. I'm RoswellGuy.com. And also on Facebook, you could follow Guy Malone for Roswell.
All right. Guy Malone, our missionary to Roswell and a longtime friend, brother, we wish you nothing but success regardless of where this leads. This is certainly a unique opportunity to share the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. And again, we will keep you in prayer in the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opening prayer, and especially the prayers of your audience as well. Again, there's some people that may or may not like many of the things I've said on this video, and may or may not like some of the things that I would like to see as policies. Again, I think I'm representing the will of a lot of people here, though. We have a silenced majority on this alien topic right now that I'm proud to get a chance to represent.
RoswellGuy.com is the website, and check the show notes at VFTB.net or down below if you're watching this on YouTube, and you'll find links to the previous interviews that we've done with Guy about his work in Roswell over the years and why we call him our missionary to Roswell. Follow us on social media. VFTB is at VFTB.net, of course. That is our global hub. You'll find us on Twitter at View from Bunker. My personal Twitter site at Derek Gilbert, or handle, I should say. Facebook, View from the Bunker. And you'll also find us at Gab, Me, We Get Her Parlor. Derek P. Gilbert, the handles there. Give us a review if you get a spare minute. We're at Spreaker, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever fine podcasts are sold. And, of course, on Facebook, give us one of those little thumbs up. Our announcer is D.C. Good. A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.